Welcome back to the committee, Representative Frazier. And we heard this bill last year. It was incredibly important and timely then. I would say it's even more so now in the moment that we're in. Again, we're sort of continuing along our series of bills related to equity and transportation, identification, sort of our theme for today, and also on Thursday, so with some informational hearings we're going to have. But so today we are taking on House File 282, collection of race and ethnicity data on applications for driver's license and identification cards. So I will move that Representative Frazier's bill, House File 282, be before the committee with a recommendation that it be re-referred to the Judiciary Committee. This is a mandatory referral because of the data issues in this bill. So welcome, Representative Frazier. We're very happy to have you, and please let us know about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, co-chair and lead and committee members. I appreciate being here this morning. Had to run over through the tunnel after chairing the Judiciary because you had Jamie Becker-Finn over here earlier. House File 282, what it does in terms of collecting data.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. We have an A1 amendment. I apologize.
No worries.
I wanted to get that before us, before your testimony. Sorry about that. This A1 amendment is before us, and I will move that we put this in the form that you would like to have the committee consider the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The A1 amendment, to describe it, it aligns the appropriation amount in the bill to the cost identified in the fiscal note. It also has the funding come from the vehicle. Funding come from the vehicle services operating account instead of the driver services account in the general fund.
Thank you. So somewhat similar to what we had last time, or last bill. Is there discussion? Okay. I will again move the A1 amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion prevails. Now, sorry for that, Representative Frazier. We now have House File 282 as amended before us. Proceed.
No worries, Chair. Just keep me on my toes. I appreciate it. House File 282, what it does is it provides and allows for the Department of Motor Vehicle to provide, to collect data, race data, demographic data on the application form. And then it allows them to share that data with the Department of Public Safety for the purposes of research, evaluation, and providing public reports. That's important because we know anecdotally, and we know from some of our local jurisdictions, not only in the state of Minnesota, but around the country, that we have seen some disparities in terms of who's pulled over, who's stopped in traffic stops, and then what ensues after those traffic stops happen. Simply put, this mechanism here will allow us to collect information, process that data, and will help policymakers be more informed as we're developing policies to prevent and cure those inequities and disparities on traffic stops. Mr. Chair, that is simply the gist of the bill, and there are testifiers here, so I will yield for testimony.
Okay, let's see. Our first testifier will be Pong Zhang from DVS, and then followed by Mike Hansen, and we'll have Justin Terrell. Welcome back to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pong Zhang, Director of the Driver and Vehicle Services Division. Mr. Chair, members, my name is Pong and Director of the Driver and Vehicle Services Division. I'm here to testify in support of House File 282, allowing for the collection of race and ethnicity data on the credential. This proposal was included in the governor's supplemental budget request last year and is included in this year's budget proposal as well. We support adding an optional field to the credential application to allow for applicants to self-identify their race and ethnicity. Collecting this data will provide an opportunity for evidence-based proposals to reduce inequities in the state of Minnesota. As drafted, this proposal will allow for sharing of identified data with the Office of Traffic Safety, who you'll hear from in a minute here, for the purposes of researching traffic stops. We also appreciate the inclusion of the resources needed to support this work. We support this proposal, and we recognize that it's an important step forward in gathering data necessary to reduce racial disparities in Minnesota. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Zhang? Yes, Representative Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. I'm not sure who's best to ask for this question, but here it goes. Do other states do this already?
Mr. Zhang?
Mr. Chair, Representative, yes, other states do this. We know of at least two. Director Hansen might have a better collection of those states. But just for an example, Colorado does this optionally, like how we're proposing. And last year, when we reached out to the state of Colorado, they had a 38% voluntary disclosure from their applicants, a little bit over 1 million credentials with self-identified data.
And then, Mr. Chair?
Yes, follow up, Representative Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The second question I have is to make this maybe more whole in terms of what we're gathering for data. Could it be something where we're asking folks that are from other states to get their information from those other states to kind of make a more whole report on who's getting pulled over and that sort of thing as well? Because right now it looks like the bill only tackles Minnesotans rather, but maybe our report is missing opportunities to collect that data from other states as well.
Mr. Zhang.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I'll defer that question to Director Hansen, who will have a better experience with working with the data. I don't know if you want to take that question now.
Okay, well, I mean, Mr. Hansen, if you wanted to take a crack at that, I know you're testifying, so maybe, how about this, Representative Brand? We'll have, Mr. Hansen's our next testifier, so he'll answer your question. But we do have a number of member questions now popping up. So first is Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, this is a really important issue in my district. And in fact, our police department has put in place a process to collect that data on their own to try to dig in and understand issues that are happening. My question is, will this help that in any way? Like how, with a local police department, how will that work?
Mr. Zhang.
Mr. Chair, Representative Kraft, our intention is to not share any of this data with local law enforcement. Now, how the data will be shared from the Office of Traffic Safety, that may have influence on policies and practices of local law enforcement. But our intention with this proposal is to not share any of that race data with law enforcement.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quickly on the logistics of this. So when the optional indication on the license, it just lists like a variety of races and ethnicities to choose from. I assume there's no verification, like you can identify with what you want, or how would that work?
Mr. Zhang.
Mr. Chair, Representative West, yes, our intent is to have applicants self-identify, and our current process, as we have it planned, is so that applicants actually can select multiple race and ethnicity categories as they so choose.
Representative West.
And then quick, if you can give me a nod to let me know the next question here. So this is printed on the license if they do it or no? Okay. No, that's all.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Norris is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question actually relates to looking at data around when people actually obtain their driver's license for the first time. I, prior to joining the legislature, ran a program that in part helped low-income students get access to driver's ed and then ultimately get a driver's license. And one of the things we're interested in looking at, are there disparities in terms of race or ethnicity between when someone actually is able to obtain that driver's license for the first time. And so would this data be able to be used for that purpose, to identify any of those disparities that might exist in our state so we can figure out some solutions if they do exist?
Mr. Zhang.
Mr. Chair, Representative, yes, the data will be available. It will be classified as private data, but under private data, we can summarize the data and analysis like that with our current MinDrive system would absolutely be possible.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for your
Mr. Chair.
question. Representative Sensen-Murira.
Yes, thank you. My question is about the A1 amendment, and I apologize if you talked about this and I just missed it, but I did see there's a part of the A1 amendment that talks about including associated activities of the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about what some of those activities might be.
Do we have staff that can speak to that?
Thank you, Representative Frazier. I'll ask Mr. Lee.
Mr. Chair and members, if you turn to the fiscal note on page 4, you'll see right at the top of the page, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension fiscal 24. This is DPS's estimated cost to develop data schema described and programming costs related, and those are the BCA-related costs. That adds to the 75,000.
Representative Sensen-Murira, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you for that. And so it's for the BCA to kind of, as I'm understanding it, analyze that data. What would be done with the data after it's analyzed? I'm not sure who that question is for.
That's probably maybe for Mr. Zong.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Representative Sensen-Murira.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm looking at the fiscal note and it talks about there's a cost in here for the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension to analyze the data. And I'm wondering what will be done with the data after it's analyzed.
Mr. Zhang.
Mr. Chair, and I'll take a stab at this, and I see Jordan walking up. What the BCA is doing here is setting up the interface in which law enforcement accesses the driver's license data to ensure that race data will not come through when they're accessing the DVS data through the law enforcement portals. All right.
Okay. I think Mr. Haldafter-Fide was satisfied with your answer.
That always feels
Okay.
good.
Any follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. The Representative Elkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In Bloomington, I know that the police are already collecting this data during traffic stops so that they can evaluate their own performance, to make sure that there's not a disparate impact on people of color. This would be a lot easier for local police departments to do if they did have access to that data. So why wouldn't we want them to have that access to that data, at least for analysis?
Mr. Zhang.
Mr. Chair, Representative Elkins, in working with community, I think one of the common themes we've heard is that we didn't want the data to influence the interaction. And after hearing from community, that's the reason why we took this approach of not sharing that data. That data will be available after the fact, though, as Director Hansen's team does their analysis. We will be able to provide by citation, and Director Hansen will go into much more detail about this, data by agency.
Yeah, Mr. Just a follow-up. I would just ask the author and the department to consider the possibility of just allowing aggregate reporting of the data.
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Elkins, that is the intent. The intent is to be able to collect these reports, do an analysis, and then to share that with the particular jurisdiction. So to your question as well, Representative Kraft, the local department or local government agency will be able to see that data. It won't identify individuals. That's the privacy part that we want to maintain. That's the part that communities were worried about. Local law enforcement officers won't have access to that when they run the initial license plate to stop. But we will provide aggregate data, summary data that shows the traffic citations, the pullovers, and then the race data cross-reference with that to see if there are any disparities.
Thank you, Representative Elkins.
Just a follow-up comment,
Quickly.
Mr. Chair, is that this afternoon in Health, I will be presenting a bill that includes a similar provision. The Minnesota Department of Health is asking the health insurers to include a race attribute in their de-identified data sources that they use for health policy analysis for pretty much the same reason.
It's good to see this as a multi-jurisdictional issue. Thank you, Representative Elkins. I don't see any further questions. Mr. Zong, thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Mike Hansen, the Director of the Office of Traffic Safety. And also just, I think there were a couple of questions that were directed your way, so included that, if you can include some answers in your testimony, that would be helpful. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, and members. My name is Mike Hansen. I have the privilege of serving as the Director for the Office of Traffic Safety within the Department of Public Safety. And I'm also here to testify in support of this bill. I'll keep my remarks very brief and then hopefully be able to touch on the questions that the members may have. This is a good step forward in bringing additional transparency to the world of traffic law enforcement. And one of the keys to making traffic law enforcement work within any community is that the community supports it and they buy into it and they understand it. And by providing this type of data, eventually, when we have a large enough base to pull from, we can pull those curtains back and we can show the community what is actually happening with traffic law enforcement in any particular area. Using that anonymized data, we can provide a variety of different kinds of reports that agencies can use, that policymakers can use in order to, again, improve that transparency and improve the community buy-in and improve the community support for traffic law enforcement, because that is a very important public safety aspect to traffic law enforcement. So with that, Mr. Chair, I don't remember specifically the questions that were brought forth, but I'm happy to take a swing at it if members have questions.
Yeah, I think Representative Brands had a question around the out-of-state nature of this and sort of the Minnesota jurisdictional opportunities and limits here. Did I phrase that correctly?
Mr. Chair, Representative, it will be a little bit difficult for that because the states that are doing the racial and ethnic data collection are using a variety of different ways to do this. And many of them are using officer identification only. And so there is not a database that we can link to the Minnesota database to track that. So it would be, at least under current circumstances, it would be a little bit difficult for us to be able to pull that out-of-state data in.
Thank you. And I guess just to this point, my understanding is that in Colorado, this is working. That some of the preliminary data, has shown that from a safety and equity lens, that this policy has been working. Is my understanding correct on that?
Mr. Chair, members, yes, that is my understanding as well. And Connecticut is also looked at as a model. They were kind of one of the first states to jump in with the data collection that we're discussing here today. And have really built a model that many other states have adopted. I think the last count was 5 or 6 additional states were adopting that Connecticut model when it comes to looking at racial and ethnic data related to traffic stops and traffic citations.
Thank you for that. We're going to hear a question from Representative Kraft and then Representative Olson. Representative Kraft.
Yeah, I want to follow up on the line of questioning around the local connection. I will say I think this is a really important bill to start getting data and understanding what's going on. So I'm very supportive. When it was talked about that intention was to provide summary level analysis data to individual agencies, what timing could that be expected to happen in? Is it like on a monthly basis? Would it be a yearly basis? Have you thought that through?
Mr. Hansen.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kraft, a very good question and something we're very open to looking at. Certainly, it's going to take a couple of years, 3 years, before we really have enough opt-ins, so to speak, for us to start to take a look at this. But certainly, the type of report, once we get the coding written and all of that, and working with Director Zhang and his team, it shouldn't be too difficult for us to pull this, on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis. Certainly, I would imagine that our office will be responsible for some type of an annual report as well to the legislature. So I think that there's a lot of room here, and this is a great complement to another governor's budget item we're moving forward for the Office of Traffic Safety, which deals with a data analytics center. And this would be able to feed into that and some of the other databases that we're using as well.
Thank you, Representative Kraft.
One more. Yep, Mr. Chair. I would encourage, building on what Representative Elkins said, that as you implement this, that you reach out to the agencies that are doing this. St. Louis Park, Bloomington, and they're using an officer identification approach. But I know the council there is very interested in the data, and so in making that connection, I think would make this be really valuable. So thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Hanson, I'm glad you mentioned the governor's budget, so I'll let the committee know that we're going to hear that budget on February 9th. So mark your calendars for that. Representative Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe it might be to Mr. Zhang, and I'm sure he can come back up here if this in fact is a question towards him, but he stated that I think it was Colorado had 38% self-identification on the application. My concern is how are we analyzing that data? Are we going to be cross-referencing it with the U.S. Census, which would include race and ethnicity on it, or what happens if there's a disparity in individuals who are reporting? So, for example, we've got X amount of people in the population that are a certain race or ethnicity, but on the licenses, we're seeing a disparity, like a vast disparity in percentages of that race that is not reporting on the data. How are we able to utilize this appropriately to make sure that we're looking across a broad range and including everyone to have accurate data?
Mr. Zhang.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I actually think that might be a question best answered by Director Hansen in terms of the analysis with the data collected. So I'll defer to Director Hansen.
Director Hansen.
Mr. Chair and Representative Olson, a very good question. And I'll venture out on a little bit of a limb here talking for my research team, but there are certainly that proportionality is something that would be very important for us to pay attention to. That, the opt-ins are, we have a proportion that matches their population in the overall population. But there are methods and techniques that the researchers can use to normalize that data and to even it out. And so I would anticipate that that's what they would happen if we did find one particular demographic that was under-reporting or under-opting in.
Yeah, just to follow up.
Representative Olson.
And the fact that you're aware of that potentiality is encouraging to me because, we could utilize that for all sorts of things. You're looking at the U.S. Census data that says this is the percentage of our population that is of this race, and this is the percentage of the population that only has this amount of licenses. Not even in looking at self-identifying, but just saying, hey, there's a huge disparity in license holders, not even just traffic stops or, police interactions, but just people who have licenses based off of our population. So I'm glad that you're aware of this. I think it would be a necessary aspect if we're going to do this form of data collection to be able to get so much more out of this than just how many police or traffic stops are made based off of race and ethnicity. There's so much more that could be obtained through this.
Thank you, Representative Olson. Representative Sensi-Mira.
Yeah, thank you. And this is a little bit of follow-up to Representative Olson's question. So I'm kind of wondering about the public education piece around this because, if I'm thinking about the purpose of the bill, right, I think it's to help us potentially gain data to understand if racial profiling is happening in traffic stops. But I could also see from a public point of view, if they don't have time to really dig into the policy, I can see fear around will this make me get racial profiled? So can you maybe talk about when people are getting their driver's license and they are choosing whether to opt into this program, kind of what's the public education piece? Because so that we don't see disparities between some races are opting in and some races are opting out for fear of racial profiling. Thank you.
Okay, that would be a good question for Mr. Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, yes, that's something that we've heard from community as well. And as we talk about how do we, get the most voluntary submitted data, that education piece is a critical work that needs to happen before this rolls out. And we hope that we see this bill get passed and that we're excited to do the work, to work with the community, to educate the community on how the data is being protected, how the data will be used, and the value that it adds to the overall benefit to Minnesota. And so there's work to be done there, and we're excited to be a part of that.
Thank you very much. Follow up? Okay. Good. Well, that concludes our member questions for our testifiers from Department of Public Safety. We have an additional public testifier. Justin Terrell is here from the Minnesota Justice Research Center. Mr. Terrell, it's so great to see you again, and we appreciated your testimony last year on this bill and all of your great work in the community. And welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein. Justin Terrell, Executive Director of the Minnesota Justice Research Center. I'm excited to be here to testify on behalf of this bill once again. Thank you, Representative Frazier. The Minnesota Justice Research Center is a 501c nonprofit. Our mission is to transform the criminal legal system, and we use research, education, and policy development to do that. In regards to the bill that's in front of you today, and you've asked all the right questions and dug into all the right issues, I would just say that, under the authority of the system, we must have quality data. This is something that we're really concerned about from a community perspective, to make sure that we are able to give people the full and not the half when it comes to what is happening to people when they are in the custody of the state. That is, the state is responsible to administering justice. And when people are in the custody of the state, we need to have transparent data so that we can talk about what happens to folks when they are in that interaction, whether it's on the side of the road or sitting in a prison. And so I think this bill moves us in the right direction because it simply allows us to start tracking what is often referred to as anecdotal evidence. And this is an experience I had from this summer when we were shaping a consent decree in Minneapolis. A lot of folks said, of course, we have race-based policing in Minneapolis, but we were able to collect, the Department of Human Rights was able to collect the data to actually affirm those experiences. And so it is completely responsible for the Department of Public Safety to collect this data, to digest this data, and to learn from it. And you'll see me over and over and over again this session encouraging you all to collect the data, to digest it, to analyze it, to report on it, and to build policies and craft policies that help us move forward. In my closing comments, I'll just say, unfortunately on Friday, we all had to witness another Black man brutalized by law enforcement on TV on a primetime Friday. And I'm assuming and hoping and praying that everyone in this room is tired of that. I know on the community side, we are tired of that. And the one key strategy in disrupting this is by making sure we are collecting data, learning what we are doing with people in the custody of the criminal legal system, and building and crafting policies that help us get a pathway out of this nonsensical, repeated pattern of violence that we find ourselves in. And so with that, I say thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative Frazier, and all the members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your work and your comments. Members, that concludes our public testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on File 282? Okay, members, this is another opportunity for some committee discussion or questions of the author. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the author, Representative Frazier. It appears that this information is voluntary and it's not mandatory. Is that going to be clearly referenced to the people that are going to be self-identifying?
Representative Frazier.
That will be made clear that it's voluntary, not mandatory.
Thank you.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my final question is, it's unclear, but it appears that this is only for new applications and not for renewals. Is that correct?
Currently, that is
Representative
correct.
Frazier.
Thank you. Those are my two.
Sorry, I'm being informed that it is for all.
Okay, I just see it for applications, which is different than a renewal, so that's why I'm not sure it's clear in the bill, so. Mr. Chair.
Representative Pete. We'll have Mr. Zhang answer that. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rep. Petersburg, yes. This data will be collected optionally at the time of renewal or new application. So anytime someone renewals or applies for a new credential, they do have to fill out that application. And it's the same application. And so it will be collected at that point. It's also noted that it will take, Director Hansen also noted this, it will take about 4 years to get through a whole renewal cycle here in Minnesota to have what we would consider complete data, but we're excited to start collecting data as soon as we can.
Representative Petersburg?
Thank you for that clarification. It just wasn't clear, so I'm glad that the intent is clearly stated today, that it's going to be for everybody, and for those that choose not to be labeled, they don't have to fill it in as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Olson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this one just kind of came to me here. What data points are being accumulated through this? So I put in, my race onto my license application. Is that just there is one more white guy who has a license? Or are we looking at it every time the police run my license, then it pings it and says, here's the race of an individual who was stopped for excessive speeding? If they could answer that question.
That may be for staff, but the intent is that information will be collected, and when we cross-reference to run their reports, then they can cross-reference and see what the race of the individual was that was stopped in that particular traffic incident, and then create the reports based on that information.
Representative Wilson, would you like any additional commentary from the
Yeah, I would just like,
agency?
I would, thank you, Mr. Chair, just clarification that every time my license would be run by a police officer or anything, then that would ping a data point and accumulate it into the database. It's not just I get my license renewed and I say what my race is, and then we have one more person with a license on that race. Because that form of data doesn't seem like it's all that,
Yeah, let's have someone from DPS. I don't know if this is Director Hansen or Mr. Zhang or both. Director Hansen will take that one.
Mr. Chair, members, if I understood the correction or the question correctly, it's how are we going to, match the racial identification against whatever happened in the field? Is that a fair summation?
Representative Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, every time a piece of data is collected, what pieces of data are going to be collected? Is it just when I apply for a new license or my renewal for my license, or I change my address and now we can track the race of an individual who has changed their address, or is it going further to every single time someone is stopped by the police, every time their license is checked for, purchasing a firearm or anything like of that aspect? Where are the data points being collected, and for what reasons are they being collected?
Director Hansen?
It's a very good question, Mr. Chair and members, and Representative Olson, a very good question. And I think some of those questions will have to be answered as we move our way through this process, because I think, data and big data, you can do a lot of different things with it if you can tie the sources together. And so certainly the intent, as I understand it, is simply to use this racial and ethnic identification as it relates to traffic law enforcement activities, and not anything outside of that. Certainly, is that something that may evolve in the future? I guess it probably could, but as I understand, at least from my perspective and where the Office of Traffic Safety would be involved in, is looking at this strictly in the realm of traffic law enforcement.
Just one final comment. Whereas some of this, this is, we've got some noble and grandiose ideas for some of this data collection, but I think that sometimes we can get into a position where we start falling off the edge of too much data collection. I mean, you look at I pull out my license to prove that I can purchase alcohol or purchase tobacco, and then we're starting to get so much data that potentially is not necessary, or so much data that we're starting to infringe upon other areas of life. So I hope that this is a fairly narrow scope and sequence for right now to get to a point of something that is potentially an egregious overstepping of bounds in our society. But then, if we do end up, I just hope that the floodgates don't open to a wide point where we lose control of this river.
Thank you. Representative Elkins.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair, but I hope my question was going to be answered in response to Representative Olson's question, but I think this is a very important question, is a record, a stop record created whenever a citation is issued or whenever the driver's license is checked? Because an important thing that we're trying to analyze here is the prevalence of, what are they called? Senior aphasia kicking in. Pretextual stops. So so you would catch pretextual stops if there's a license check but no citation. You would not collect data about pretextual stops if the record is only created if a citation is issued.
Representative Frazier.
Just quickly, Representative Elkins, thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. Representative Elkins, thank you for that question. It's more than just, pretextual stops currently are legal. So it's more than just capturing that. What it's capturing is they will be able to collect the data and cross-reference that data based on that stop, cross-reference that data with the licensure of the individual that's captured. And now they'll be able to have the race and ethnic data on that individual and then be able to run an analysis and a report that shows whether or not we're seeing disparities. Because the whole issue is whether or not these pretextual stops are based on race, whether it's racial profiling.
Representative Elkins, a follow-up.
Yeah, the question really is, would a pretextual stop generate a record?
That's probably one for Director Hansen.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair and members, in the vast majority of law enforcement agencies that I'm familiar with, yes, every contact, every traffic stop results in some type of a record being generated, whether it's a CAD event or a citation issued or a warning, written warning issued or something like that. There is a record built.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Representative Fogelman.
Mr. Chair, I guess my question is, you don't have to opt into this. So what kind of percentage of participants are needed to make this relevant? And what do you do if you stop, how is it affected if you stop someone without a license?
I think we'll ask, maybe we should have Mr. Hansen just
Yeah.
stay here for a little bit. We have 8 minutes left. Maybe you should just park yourself here at the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative, if somebody is stopped and they don't have a license, there would be no, if they've never had a license, that they never would have had the opportunity to opt in and provide that racial or ethnic information. If, for instance, they did have a license, but it was revoked or suspended or canceled, and they had opted in, we would still be able to match that record up with that racial identification that they provided when they did. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Representative Fogelman.
I guess I just don't know how it would factor in to the whole thing that you're trying to get across, because it's a little confusing. I guess that is good for now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see anyone else on the list. Are there other members that have questions or comments? Any further discussion? Just before your closing comments, Representative Frazier, I would just want to thank you. I think this is, an important bill. Representative Frazier and I were just talking yesterday, I think, and I could be wrong in my legislative history here, but we haven't really done anything like this since the early 2000s. So I think this is important that this issue be revisited. So much has happened since then. It wasn't exactly this. It was a traffic stop study, I think, at that time. So this is a little bit different, but we're getting at the same issue. And so I thank you and really appreciate the committee discussion on this bill, and also the other two bills we heard today. So before we vote, any closing comments, Representative Frazier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, that study was done in 2003 in conjunction with the University of Minnesota. And at that time, you had jurisdictions opt in. There were a significant number of jurisdictions that did opt in. And it will be informative as we move forward to build this system out, because they did account for assumptions and estimations of ethnic and race and drivers on the road to determine, to make decisions about the statistical analysis that would happen to create those reports. And we haven't done anything since then. We, as Mr. Terrell testified here, we have a lot of anecdotes. We have reports from community around this. It would be great to have excuse me, it would be great to have transparency and evidence to support that, so to inform our policymakers as we're making laws and policies around these issues to rectify and clear up any disparities that we do have. So I appreciate the support on this bill as we're moving forward.
Thank you so much, Representative Frazier. And so with that, I will renew my motion that House File 282 as amended be recommended and re-referred to the Committee on Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion prevails. Thank you so much. You're on your way to the Judiciary
Thank you,
Committee.
Mr. Chair, Committee.